Hello, and welcome back to the Barleymen, episode 6. We have an exciting episode for you where we are crossing into a first time for the Barleymen.
Indeed.
Jason, what are we doing today?
Alright, so we're going to do our first episode on Japanese whiskey, and for me, I think what better way to start than with Hibiki Japanese Harmony, which is a blend from the Suntory distillery. And I think this is really, Mike, this is for people that are just starting to get into Japanese whiskey. The Hibiki blend is really perfect, for me, it would be a perfect entry point. Like a first experience as far as Japanese whiskey. It's really nice. It's a blend. It's very well rounded, and I think it appeals, or it would appeal, to most whiskey drinkers.
Yeah, now so let's talk about this for a second, because there's a very definitive quality between a classic Scotch and, let's say, an American whiskey, right? Scotch is very smooth, it has subtleties and complexities, whereas American whiskey is usually the nose. It's almost like being punched in the face, and it's very harsh. You could say that it represents the American spirit, and that doesn't mean that there aren't smooth American whiskeys. It just means that in comparison, one is more refined and subtle, and one is more overt in your face. Tell me what makes Japanese whiskey different.
Well, I would actually say it is unique in a way. Definitely Japanese whiskey stands out, but I think you're going to find, Mike, when you have this, it's going to definitely align more with what you associate with Scotch as far as being smooth. Particularly this one, because there are peated and non-peated Japanese whiskeys. Most of them gear or lean towards the sweeter non-peated side of things, and this one definitely is one of those. But I think you're going to find the smoothness very reminiscent of Scotch.
Okay, so we're looking at a smoothness like Scotch.
Yes.
And it can come in a peated or a non-peated variety. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about Japanese whiskeys, like what's the history?
Okay, good question. All right, so with Japanese whiskey, it's really all about two men. So the first man was Shinjiro Torii. He actually started selling alcohol in 1899. He started selling imported wine, and then he actually made his own fortified wine. It was called Red Ball, and so he did this for a while. But in the mid-1920s, he wanted to get into the whiskey market. There was really no whiskey market in Japan, so he wanted to be kind of the first on the scene. Well, as things would work out, he crossed paths with the other big name in Japanese whiskey, and his name was Masataka Taketsuru, who actually, in the early 1920s, traveled to Japan to study chemistry, and while he was doing that, he was an apprentice at not one, not two, but 3 Scotch distilleries. One Speyside, one Lowlands, and one, the last one actually, was Campbelltown. And he came back to Japan not only with a knowledge of the intricacies of the making of Scotch, but he also brought back a Scottish wife, which was quite a sensation. It's actually a really famous story in Japan. There was a TV series based on Taketsuru, his wife, and basically the whole story of the romance, and it was kind of a forbidden thing from both sides. Anyway, cut that story to the quick. So Taketsuru comes back, he crosses paths with Torii, and he works for him, and they form Suntory, which was the first whiskey company in Japan. And so they started producing whiskeys in the late 1920s, early 1930s, and it caught off pretty quickly, became pretty popular. However, within 10 years, they started having some pretty big differences in opinion. See, Torii, he wanted something smooth and sweet that would appeal more to the Japanese public, whereas Taketsuru, coming from Scotland, he wanted something more traditional. He liked the peated whiskeys, and that's what he wanted to do. But Torii at Suntory kind of never let him go in that direction. So after a little while, Taketsuru was like, I'm going to go out on my own. So that's what he did in the late 30s, early 40s. He went on his own, started his own company, which is the other big name. There's 2 big names in Japan when it comes to whiskeys. There's Suntory and there's Nikka. Nikka was formed by Taketsuru. And what he did was he went first to Yoichi in Hokkaido, the northern island, because he thought that the climate there was the closest to Scotland. So he set up a distillery there. And then later he went down to Miyagi-ken, and he set up the second distillery there, which is Miyagi-kyo. Anyway, going back, so this whiskey right here, this is a Suntory whiskey, and this is a blend, and so it's actually a mix of 3 different distilleries. So the first one is the famous one that Suntory has, is the Yamazaki. So there's Yamazaki, which I have yet to try. We will on a later episode for sure.
Yes.
And then Yamazaki. The other one, another one I want to try that I've never tried is Hakushu. So it's got that, but actually, you know what the main ingredient is? The biggest one is Cheetah grain whiskey.
Oh.
So this is actually mostly grain whiskey. However, it does have, as I said, it's got the Yamazaki and the Hakushu, which are single malts, but you've got grain whiskey as well from the Cheetah distillery. So yeah, it's quite a blend. It's got a lot of different stuff going on. But anyway, if I could talk really quickly about the packaging here.
Yeah, do.
Okay, so Suntory, established 1923. Hibiki, here is the kanji for Hibiki, which in Japanese means either echo or resonance. And so it's a very nice box. Let's take a look inside.
All right, but before you open it, there's some things we should talk about.
Okay, such as?
So, if you would be so kind as to pass those glasses. So, you and I had a debate about this, and I just want to share this debate with you, our viewers. Here we have the Glencairn glass. You've heard us talk about it before. It is the traditional whiskey glass. If you want to nose and taste whiskey and get the fullest expression, this is the sort of glass that you want to own. However, our debate is, we were talking about, because you know here at the Barleymen, we care about our glassware.
Indeed.
That should be a shirt. Barleymen, we care about our glassware. Anyway, we were talking about, is there a definitive glass that you would want for Japanese whiskeys? And obviously for the tasting and the nosing, this is the gold standard. But should there be other standards, do you think, with American whiskeys and with Scotch and with Japanese whiskeys? Because we're talking about a different sort of concoction, and although this gives you the aromatic quality and funnels it right to the nose, is it the proper presentation?
Wow, that's a loaded one. That's a good question, Mike. There are a lot of amazing Japanese tumblers out there. I've seen a lot of stuff on Instagram. Some I've been very tempted to buy. This would require a little bit more research and maybe some feedback from you guys as far as, you got any ideas on this? I don't know.
I also don't know, but we would love to hear your thoughts and comments. For me, because presentation matters, the story matters. We talked about this on episode 1 forever ago. Basically, when we talk about alcohols and we talk about the creation of alcohols, we are talking about the human story. We're talking about the conditions, we're talking about the culture, we're talking about the terre noire, where we are basically saying that these things matter in the production. And to assume that a single glass can embody all of what whiskey has, I just don't buy it. I understand that for the smelling and the tasting, this is the correct shape. But for the serving on a porch in the middle of summer, I'm breaking out Hibiki, and I feel like I want something different.
Oh, I would definitely want a tumbler in a situation like that. If I was, like you said, if it was summer and we were on a deck or back porch and we were going to be sipping this, this wouldn't be my vessel of choice. I would definitely go for some type of tumbler.
So I think that one of our exploratory things that we should do as the Barleymen, we never stop exploring, we need to explore some glassware. And we would love your help. Please comment below if you have what you believe will be the perfect glassware as we continue to drink Japanese whiskeys.
Yeah, I'd definitely be interested to hear your feedback because I have no idea.
All right, by all means, continue with the box.
So let's take a look at what we have inside here. Okay.
Ooh, look at that.
Oh, look at this. Now, to be fair, it's not exactly a new bottle. I've had a few drams out of this, but it's quite an elegant package considering that this retails for under $100. You can get it around, I think, $90 right now. But it's a really nice bottle, very, very unique. It's got 24 sides to it. Now, why 24?
Is it symbolic?
It is symbolic. Actually, in traditional Japan, there were 24 seasons, like 24 micro seasons of the year. It wasn't 4, so each of the 4 was separated into 6. So you had 24 seasons of the year, so this has 24 sides. Another thing that's really nice, oh boy, it's actually got some heft to it, is the cap. So you've got cork, but then on top, you've got this glass, which looks like it's 12-sided, but then etched into it is the kanji for Hibiki, which is, yeah, that's a really nice touch right there. I really like that. So, anyway, yeah, that's really pretty much it. Let's see what it says. A meticulous blend of the finest selection of whiskeys, 43% alcohol by volume. So, a little stronger than your standard 40%.
Let's talk about that for a second. Before we get into this in specific, let's talk about blended whiskey versus a single malt.
Okay, so a single malt just means that it's made by one distillery. Now, it can be a blend of multiple things at that distillery, and a lot of them are. Like, we had the Glenmorangie Signet. That's a single malt, but that's a blend, as we discussed in episode 4. That's a blend of four different types of whiskey, but they were all on site. They were all produced and stored by that distillery. Now, when you get a blend, that's when you're bringing in multiple whiskey. You're bringing in whiskeys from multiple distilleries. And in this case, we've got 3. We've got the Yamazaki, the Hakushu, and the Cheetah. And we've got 2 single malts and 1 grain. So this isn't this is not a single malt. And it's not even
because it's not from a single distillery.
And it's also not a blended malt, because a blended malt would be all single malts that are from different distilleries that use just barley. This has both malt, like the barley, and it also has grain, which could be corn, it could be rice, could be some other different types of grains that are used for the grain.
Which is an important distinction, right? You know that we here on the Barleymen, part of our mission is to educate. So knowing the difference between a single malt, a blended, and you said a blended malt.
Yeah, so there is a blended malt. There's also just blended. If it just says blended like this, it's a blend, then it can have single malt and grain as well.
But I do know this, right? I don't know much about Japanese whiskeys, but I do know this. From my limited research that I've done, I know that the blending process for this particular flavor profile is meticulous.
Oh, for sure. The Hibiki blend has been in the Suntory lineup for quite some time, and there's multiple expressions. We were discussing that before. There's multiple expressions. This one is the only one that I've tried, but I'm really looking forward to trying as many as I can, because this one is just amazing. Now,
yeah, Hibiki makes a 12-year, and they make a 17-year as well.
There's more. I don't know. I would say there's 5 or 6. But you know what is important, Mike, before we continue, like as far as education, is this real Japanese whiskey?
You tell me. I mean, it is a product of Japan.
It is a product of Japan, and this is real Japanese whiskey. However, there are a lot of whiskeys in Japan that are sold from Japan that are not actually Japanese whiskey. It's a huge thing these days. It's kind of been a quiet secret for a long time, for decades. What a lot of distilleries were doing in Japan is they were importing whiskeys from Scotland, mostly from Scotland, but also some from Canada and a little bit from the United States. Mostly, though, it was Scotland and Canada. They were importing these whiskeys, they were rebottling them, and then they were selling them as Japanese whiskey. And this still goes on today, actually. However, last year, I forget who it was, but a gentleman put forth an initiative that needed to stop. Because here's the weird thing. This is an anomaly as far as Japanese are concerned. Because when it comes to the Japanese in any type of food or beverage, they are very strict about the labeling. Not only the labeling, but the creation, everything that goes into it. They're very strict. Like, for example, if you buy fish in Japan, they have to label whether it came from the East Coast or the West Coast. All the details. Whiskey is one glaring anomaly to the Japanese mindset as far as this, which has always struck me as weird that they would do that. They would import whiskeys from other countries, rebottle it, and then package it as Japanese. There's a lot of people, this has been a big topic, a lot of people are against it, but now a lot of the big companies like, especially Nikka. Suntory is a little bit slower, but Nikka, if you go to Nikka's website and you look at any of their whiskeys, it'll tell you if it is Japanese or what they call world blend. That's a new term they're using. And if it says world blend, that means it's probably either a little bit Japanese or not Japanese at all.
Interesting.
So this is a big thing that's changing, and last time I went to Japan, I was really conscious about this. I'm like, I don't want to go and buy something that's not Japanese. So I had to do some research, and I found there's a website out there. I don't remember it, but if you do some Google search, some Google ninjutsu, you can find it. And there was a guy.
And then add it to the comments.
Yes. Maybe I'll do that. But anyway, there was this gentleman, and he made basically an infographic, and it had every single offering of Japanese whiskey. All the manufacturers and their expressions, and then a column. Is it Japanese or not? This is Japanese. This is 100% Japanese. The 3 distilleries that I mentioned before, what's going into this, as far as I know, is entirely Japanese. So, yeah.
And, I mean, I will say the other thing that I know about Japanese whiskeys, it's the only other thing I know, is that their yeast strains and process are very proprietary and protected, which is why you would want to seek out the true Japanese product, much like with sakis, etc. Heavily guarded secret.
Yes, another reason why you really would want to go after and there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to go after the authentic Japanese whiskey, but one of them is that, okay, so Scotch, right? What are they using? They're using American oak, European oak, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Pretty much. And then what else do they do? It's one of those two. And it's housed something in it before.
To house that subtle flavor profile.
Exactly, right? And it could be sherry, it could be pour, all these different beverages. Usually,
could be bourbon.
Could be bourbon,
yep.
And that's often the case. Yes, Scottish distilleries often reuse, Jack Daniel's, Jim Beam, these other American bourbon producers. They'll reuse the barrels. However, Japan. One interesting fact about Japan is, as far as biodiversity, it's very rich in trees. The amount of trees in Japan is astounding, including oak species. Japan has a native oak called the Mizunara oak, and so they will age their whiskey in Mizunara, which is totally different than American oak, and it's totally different than European oak, and it has a very unique flavor profile. And some of what we have here, I'm not sure if it's the Yamazaki or the Hakushu or both, are aged in Mizunara oak, not American or European oak. So that is another reason that you want to seek out the Japanese whiskey, is to get that Mizunara oak experience.
I mean, and honestly, this is as simple as, if I travel to Japan, what I don't want to do is eat McDonald's. Why am I eating McDonald's in Japan? So if we're going to experience flavors, and we're going to experience, in this case, whiskeys and spirits from a specific region, the more authentic to the region, the better the experience as far as the exploration.
Of course. No
Absolutely.
question.
Well, I'm excited.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I am.
All right. Let me pour you a glass. Let's see here.
While Jason is pouring, we realized here at the Barleymen that we don't often tell you to like and subscribe. For the first time ever, please like and subscribe. That's pretty close. That was like a magic trick. You were like,
you should know.
Look at these. I'm taking the one that has a little less.
Well, that's typical.
I don't know, you brought it, so you pushing the more on me, that's suspect.
All right. Well, let's start. First off, okay, as I've said before, the look. We've got a nice light golden amber. I'm not seeing any particulates.
No particulate. It is very clear.
Very clear. Okay.
Yeah, that is. I mean, that's almost. It is a light amber, but it's light is the key word, is what I want to say.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they use artificial coloring or not. That's a good question. I'll have to look that up. I don't know.
We should look that up and add it.
Let's nose it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very nice.
Hmm.
It's very fragrant. I'm getting oak. Definitely sweetness.
Okay, so oak, yes.
But what kind of oak?
Butteriness, yes. I'm going to assume that it is the native Japanese oak.
I think so.
It definitely does not smell like American oak.
No,
I can tell
no.
you that outright.
Yeah, it's oak, but it is different. But definitely an
Okay.
enticing aroma.
This is an interesting note. Ready? And I'm just going with it because it's what I'm smelling.
Uh-huh.
It's like almost like green mango, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It has that like it's fruity, but not ripe fruit. It's more green and maybe a hint of nutmeg.
I am getting a little bit of fruit, a little bit of. Oh, it's kind of hard to place it.
It does smell good though. I like the nose on this.
Oh, anyone that likes your sweeter scotches, your Highlands, your Speysides, I think they smell this, and it's gonna, be right up their alley.
Absolutely. Well, shall we with the moment of truth?
All right, you ready?
I am ready.
Kampai.
Kampai. Now that is a sensation. I always talk about mouthfeel. Today is no exception. So as I bring it back, even though I swished it around, even though it made contact with all the mouth, I can tell you it didn't really start tingling. It tingled in the back, and it was like unfurling a vine forward up the tip of my tongue. Nothing on the sides, nothing on the roof. It's from the back and it moves forward, which is unusual for me because normally it's the opposite. So I get the tingling sensation, I get the taste, but it's coming back forward.
Now that you say that, yeah, I'm getting the same thing. I'm getting that feel, like that real centralized feel in the mouth, and I do feel like it goes back and then kind of comes forward. But overall, for me, it's a very creamy, buttery mouthfeel. And as far as the taste, also it's very smooth and buttery. Sweetness, there's a lot of sweetness there. Definitely, there's no smoke, there's no peat.
No, this is sweet. It's sweet like honey, but you may remember with Signet I said spiced honey. This is not spiced honey. This is just honey.
Yeah.
Just light honey, and it's such an odd sensation for me that it's here and then rolls forward. It's almost like I don't know how to describe it, but it's reverse of everything else I ever taste with whiskey, not in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
It's truly its own experience where it's from the back forward, but as it hits the tip of my tongue, that sweetness just resonates all the way back through.
Mm-hmm.
Which is very enjoyable. It's a very enjoyable sensation.
Yeah, I mean, I have no complaints. I think it's just overall it's balanced, it's smooth. There's no bitterness, there's no punch to the mouth. It's just overall it's a smooth experience, very smooth whiskey.
And let's talk about that for a second, right? I made the comparison between Scotch and American whiskey, and just a very light comparison. We can go in more in depth in the future. Here, I agree with you. When I'm nosing it, when I'm tasting it, there's no sudden BAM, right? Which is a characteristic that I look for in American whiskeys.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only one that I expect, it's one I look for, where it's like, I'm here,
Yeah.
right? This isn't that. This is subtle, but it's not the same smoothness as Scotch. This is its own creature, and what I mean by that is, first off, the way the mouthfeel back to forward, that's incredible. That makes it its own creature. But not only that, this is smooth, but it isn't as smooth to me as Scotch. It's smooth, but it's smooth in a different way.
Okay.
This is almost like there is still, when I say punch, I don't want you to hear offensive, but this still packs its own little punch as it unveils, whereas Scotch to me does not. Scotch is just a smooth ride down. American whiskey's big punch. This, I would say, little micro punches.
Okay. I can kind of see that, but overall, I would say this is way closer to Scotch than American whiskey.
I concur. I mean, I think that what you said about that is good. If you're setting up your expectation, you should not be expecting this to be bold and brash and in your face. Still has the subtleties and the unveiling of flavors. I just don't know that it reaches the same level of subtlety and disclosure of flavor as Scotch.
I don't know. I think I would argue with you on that one. I think it's holds its own, and I think you could argue that that it is as smooth as Scotch. But yeah, for me,
you are right. You're arguing that it's as smooth
I totally
as
Scotch. am. Yeah, no, I say it is, and I say this would be perfect. Actually, this is such a well-rounded. It's hard to place a season to this. Be like, oh, this is a summer or a winter. I mean, I think this could really work anytime.
I mean, for me, so first off, I do just want to say it's great that we disagree. However, please hear from me, when I talk about American whiskeys and I talk about a punch, that doesn't mean I don't enjoy American whiskeys. When I talk about this not being as smooth as Scotch, that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy it. I do enjoy all of these things. It's the diversity that brings the spice of life. I just notice the differences between them, and not accusing you of not. As far as season goes, though, I think that this would be a beautiful whiskey to bring out for about 3/4 of the year. So that specific 3 months where we're talking November, December, January, this is not my go-to.
Okay.
I think that it has a great flavor for the spring. I can see enjoying this as the sun's coming out and we're watching things grow. I can see it in the heat of the summer, right? If we think about the climate of Japan, what do we need in a drink in Japan?
Well, again, it definitely depends on the season, but you want something that's going to be refreshing. Yeah. And this is definitely, I would consider it in the whiskey world way more refreshing than some of our smokier expressions.
I believe that this is far more refreshing than, let's say, Scotch.
Yeah.
If we're talking about this and then I have a nice Isla right next to it,
oh,
for sure, this is the refreshing.
Yeah, totally. It would be interesting, though, to put this against, let's say, the Three Glens or something like that. This is definitely more aligned with that region of Scotland, I would say.
I mean, I feel like we can't just do that. I feel like what we'd have to do, first let's compare Three Glens, and then let's blind taste test and see if we can tell the difference between American, Scotland, and Japan.
Ooh, that's a good idea, actually. And I do want to do the Three Glens, because I've had Glenmorangie and I've had Glenlivet. You know where I stand on that, but I've yet to have Glenfiddich. So
Glenfiddich is enjoyable.
Yeah, I want to try all three. But yeah.
I feel like I feel like in an episode to come, we need the blind international taste test. I'm talking about the differences between American whiskey, Scotch, and Japanese whiskey. Can I put my money where my mouth is? And I believe I can.
All right.
Okay. So, let's talk about the coolness factor.
Well, it's Suntory. So, that name right there puts it way up. I mean, like I said previously in the episode, there's really two big names in the Japanese world of whiskey. Unlike Scotland or even the United States, where you've got a lot. Mm-hmm. Like Scotland, you'd say, what are the top two? Ooh, tough call. In Japan, it's really easy. It's Suntory, Nikka. Those are your two big brands. Now, each of them have multiple distilleries under them, and each of those have multiple expressions under them, but you go to the top, it's Suntory and Nikka. And as far as Americans, we do not have access to many of these expressions. This is one of the few nice ones that not all Americans, but a lot of Americans have access to. So this is one I would highly recommend if you're interested in getting into the world of Japanese whiskey. You know, you've had American whiskey or Scotch, and you're like, you want to try Japanese whiskey. I highly recommend this as your entry point.
And I want to add, to me, the coolness factor is this, which is, if indeed the thing that I've been saying since episode 1 is true, if indeed our expressions in beer and in whiskey and in alcohol tell a story about our humanity, then why wouldn't you want the most complete story you can possibly have and experience as a human being? The coolness factor of this particular one for me is that it is the oldest, comes from the oldest distillery in Japan.
Yeah, that's true.
For whiskey. It is unusual, and I mean, I said what I said about Scotch, American whiskey, and Japanese whiskey. How can you prove me wrong if you never try it?
Yeah, there's only one way to find out, and this is a great way to start.
And it's delightful. It is delightful.
Indeed it is.
So I have to say, Jason, to your health.
And yours.
Kampai, is that what you said?
Kampai.
Kanpai?
Kanpai. Kampai.
Ah,
Or with
right.
it can be with an M or an N. Actually, Kampai with an M. Say with an M. Kampai.
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 For the Barleymen, I'm Mike.
I'm Jason.
And as we always say at the Barleymen,
Never stop exploring.
Kampai!